Hey guys, it's Natalia, and today I thought, because Valentine's Day is pretty much nearly here, I thought I would do another book recommendations so you guys have something exciting to read during Valentine's Day. If you're spending it by yourself like I am, it's good to have a distraction or just to do some good self-care in terms of reading. So today I thought I would share with you some romance book recommendations, but this one is going to be fantasy based. So I feel like most of these books are more romance fantasy books than fantasy over romance books, but I'll let you guys decide. Some of these you probably have already read because they have been out for a while, and I also have one sci-fi as well. So I feel like there's something for everyone if you're a romance reader trying to branch out, or if you're a fantasy reader in the mood for a little bit of romance. So let's just get on into my book recommendations for romance fantasy books. So the first one I'm going to start off with is These Broken Stars by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. So this is a sci-fi novel following both the perspectives of Lilac and Tava. Tava is a nobody war hero who meets Lilac on this spaceship, and she is like one of the most important guy's daughters. They meet, but they kind of realize they're probably not meant for each other on this spaceship, and then this spaceship ends up, I can't remember exactly, but something happens and they're the only survivors of this crash, and they end up landing on this kind of abandoned planet, and it's basically their love story. This is one of the most emotional sci-fi books I have ever read. It's got a fantastical element to it. It is so good. If you're looking for a tearjerker, highly recommend it because you could probably read this whole book in one sitting. It is so good. I grew so attached to the characters that I feel like at the end, even though the ending and the book was emotional, I feel like I cried because I knew this was the only book we would get following both Tava and Lilac, because this is a trilogy. It's called the Starbound trilogy, but in each book we follow a different couple. So I highly recommend this for people who are looking for a good romance while there's still a fantastical and sci-fi element to the story. So the next book that I have here is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This is one of my all-time favorite fantasy books because of the romance. The romance in this trilogy is so good. I feel like Mary E. Pearson is one of the best fantasy authors at crafting romance, because in this one we follow a world of Morrigan. There's Venda, there's Delbreck, but we follow the Princess of Morrigan, Lyra. So she is governed by tradition. She basically is being married off to Prince of Delbreck, who she has never met. So she has no idea what he looks like, what he is like as a person, and she just gets sick of it. She's always been kind of more rebellious. She always wanted to be like her brothers, just follow her own path in life. So her and her best friend, who is also her servant, they just escape, and she has the Prince of Delbreck going after her. She doesn't know, and an assassin from a neighboring kingdom of Venda going after her as well. And I love this. In the first book there's not, well, there is a romance, but you don't know who she's gonna end up with. Is it gonna be the Prince of Delbreck, or is it gonna be the assassin from Venda? And I love that. Even when I was rereading this, I felt oh, maybe it's gonna change, but I already knew who was who. But it was still kind of crazy to see how good Mary E. Pearson was at crafting that plot device you didn't know, and you also get to follow their perspectives, the male's perspectives, and you still don't know who's who. So good. I love the romance. I love the couple in this series. It's just great. And there's some good side romances that you get to see in later books. So good. Highly recommend it. So the next book is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Macarin. So I feel like I've been talking a lot about this book recently because I only just read it for the first time in January. I do have a full book review, so if you want to check out my thoughts, it's spoiler free, so of course you can watch it if you haven't read the book, but I had to recommend this one because it's a slow burn romance in a fantasy. I feel like we don't get to see that often. I feel like mostly it's love at first sight and romances like that, but this one is a slow burn burn marriage of convenience between a witch hunter and a witch. So we follow Lou and Reed, and we get to follow both of their perspectives, so I always love that because I love seeing like how each side in the relationship feels about the situation they're in and like one another. This is kind of like an enemies to lovers as well, so I feel like it's perfect. I feel like romance readers and both fantasy readers will really appreciate the romance because it's so good. Like, highly recommend it. I don't know what else to say. I feel like you should just read this book and give it a shot and see for yourself if you like it. I loved it and I can't wait for the second book. So yeah, you have that to look forward to if you read this book this Valentine's Day. So the next book that I have to recommend for you guys is Dance of Thieves by Mary A. Pearson. So I know I already mentioned Mary A. Pearson as like being the best at writing romance in a fantasy, but I had to mention this duology as well because it is a duology. The Remnant Chronicles is a trilogy, and this one follows the same world as the Remnant Chronicles but a couple years after. So you might want to read the Remnant Chronicles before reading this, but I've heard you don't have to. You're still not going to be lost, and that's understandable. You just get to see the characters from the previous series, like in this series, like briefly, their side characters. So in this one we follow Jace and Cassie. Cassie is part of the Queen's return, and she gets tasked on a mission to figure out if the Ballingers, who Jace has newly been appointed to rule because his father passed away, if they're harboring a fugitive of the war that took place in the Remnant Chronicles. And the romance in this took me by surprise when I first read this book. I really want to give it a reread because Jace and Cassie are just two of the purest souls you can find in a fantasy. You will be like so happy when reading this book because their romance is just so delicious, so good. I don't want to say too much, just go into it blindly. The audiobook is fabulous. Highly recommend the audiobook, but if you have a copy, you can still read it and enjoy it because damn, it is so good. And you can pick up Vow of Thieves, which is as good as this one, but the romance in this is just the best. Okay, so the next book that I have here for you is one that's probably gonna surprise you, but ever since rereading it, I've been really thinking how I always forget how romance heavy it is in some aspects of it. Like, there's a lot of couples in this duology. So it is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So recently I actually reread this book. It was last year, but I recently reread Crooked Kingdom, I feel like, and I realized this time around, like I always knew this, but I just realized upon my reread like how romance heavy it is. Like, we have all these different perspectives we follow. We've got Kaz, we've got Inej, we've got Nina, we've got Matthias, we've got Jesper, and we've got Wylan, and like they all end up being couples in one form or another. And I feel like this book, if you don't know what it's about, it's basically part of the Grisha world, and we follow Kaz and his band of misfits as they go on a heist. And yeah, I just always forget how good the romances are in these because you have one romance for like each different person, what they like. So we've got like a very slow burn between Kaz and someone else. When I say who, I feel like everyone knows what couples are in this book, but yeah, we have like that slow burn romance where it's like, you know, they care about each other but they're not doing anything about it because of their past and like who they are as a person. Then we've got like Matthias and Nina who love each other, but then like Matthias thought Nina betrayed him, and like they're kind of like enemies as well because, you know, she's Grisha, he's from Fjerda. And then we've got Jesper and Wyland who are just cute cinnamon buns. Basically, I love them so much. So yeah, I highly recommend this. I've seen like some romance readers, for instance Jess from Peace Love Books. I saw one of her statuses on Goodreads like being like, why did no one tell me the romance was so good in this book? So that's why I thought I would recommend it for you guys if you haven't read this yet. I know a couple people still haven't read this book. Like, I highly recommend it, it's so good. And then the last book that I have here for you guys is Stolen Songbird by Danielle L. Jensen. So this is the first book in the Malediction trilogy where we follow Cecile and Tristan. Tristan is like the prince of the trolls who are stuck under a mountain because a witch cursed them like centuries ago, and then Cecile ends up being kidnapped and sold to the trolls as kind of like a bride for Tristan. But yeah, this is kind of like a slow burn marriage of convenience novel. They start breaking down their barriers and like falling in love, and it's so good. Like, I highly recommend this. I recently finished the series and I feel like the first book was my favorite, and also there's a prequel called The Broken One, which is really good as well. This one and that one's my favorite, so I highly recommend it. You can read actually the prequel. You don't have to read it after finishing this series, but you can like read it either after this book or after you finish the series. But that one follows Mark and Penelope's story, and that's a very good romance as well. I really love it. But so far I'm recommending you this book. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. Romance is great, the troll politics amazing, and just like the setting is so good. I feel like it's very unique in the plot as well. So yeah guys, that is it for my fantasy / sci-fi romance book recommendations. I hope you guys like actually find a book that you want to read this Valentine's Day from this list. I thought it'd be fun to like combine my two favorite genres of fantasy and romance and recommend you that this year. Don't worry, I'll still have like romance book recommendations because those are like my favorite to film in terms of book recommendations, but I thought this would be a fun video to post. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!